Welcome to I Have the Power Query. Let's learn some Power Query. This is a 4-part 101 series teaching you the absolute basics of just getting Power Query working. In Part 2, we queried our data in the Power Query editor. In Part 3, we're going to get that data back out. There are two possible destinations for your data. A table, that's what we did at the end of Part 2. We output our processed data in a new table. The data model. Power Query doesn't automatically put the data in the data model. You have to ask it to do so. Both. You can put the data into a table and into the data model at the same time. This is the table that Power Query loaded for us in Part 2 when we selected Close and Load. We got our TBL months table into Power Query and added the year column. Then we got the data back out as a new table in this worksheet. Come up to Data, select Queries and Connections, and you'll see one query called TBL months. Double-click on the query and we're back in the Power Query editor. I'm going to change the query by deleting some steps. Let's try to load the data somewhere else. But when we go to Close and Load, one of the options is grayed out. I want to close and load the data to somewhere else. Once you've loaded the data once, you can't change the load location from within the Power Query editor. So I'll come up and click the cross in the top right-hand corner. Keep will keep any changes and discard will discard any changes we made. Come over to the Query and Connections sidebar. Right-click on the query, select Load To, and this dialog box appears. It might look like this in your version of Excel. You can see that the Power Query is just being loaded to a table right now. Click Add to Data Model, and you'll get a warning that you are changing something. Click OK. With this step, we have output the data to a table and the data model. You might be asking, what's the point of all this? All we've done is take a set of data, use this newfangled Power Query to output the same table with a new column and in a different color. We now know how to load to the data model, but how do we access the data model? Remember, this is a 101 series about just getting Power Query working, so I'm showing you a very simple example. In reality, you wouldn't be loading just one table. You could be loading multiple tables from one workbook. You could be loading data from the internet, from other databases, or from hundreds of other Excel files. The steps in this 101 series would be easy to replicate without using Power Query. Just copy a table from one sheet to another. But imagine how long it would take you to open 100 workbooks and copy that data into one file. And then imagine how much maintenance would be required when you have another 100 workbooks. And then imagine how annoyed you'd be if your boss told you that there was a mistake in all 200 files, so you had to start again. What Power Query can do with one simple table, it can do for thousands of tables. Finally, we'll look at connection only and adding to the data model. Right-click on the query, keep data model ticked, but set only create connection. The possible data loss warning appears. We don't want to see the table anymore, so click OK. Come over to Queries and Connections. You'll see that the rows are still being loaded even though the table has gone. You would use this option if you wanted to pull a summary report from your data but didn't actually want to see every row and every column of that data. With connection only, Power Query doesn't duplicate our data by creating another table. But because we've loaded the data into the data model, we can use it to create charts and pivot tables, which we'll look at more in Part 4. So in this part, we output Power Query to a table, we added the table to the data model, and we defined a connection to our data source. Parts 1 and 2 are done. In Part 3, we looked at different ways that we can output our data. In Part 4, we're going to make some pivot tables and pivot charts. See you in the final part of this 101 series.